somebody cut the head off of a pig and they threw it at our house. And they wrote on the house in Spanish, "Fueran gringos," which means get out, gringos.
Foreigners. Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. My guest today was introduced to me only yesterday or 2 days ago because I was desperately looking for a podcast guest, which normally isn't the case, but I had a little bit of a hiccup and I was traveling and I just realized that I needed, and now suddenly I have all these gorgeous people who want to speak to me. And one of them is from the US. His mother is from El Salvador. He has done a ton of things that I want to talk. He's in the US Peace Corps. He has worked in Costa Rica. He has worked in Togo, and I think in Mali, and I don't know where else. And we're going to find everything out during this talk. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Kevin Brown.
Miss Elizabeth, thank you so much for having me.
It is. I'm so glad you're here because just from the few minutes that we talked before, I know that this is going to be a good episode.
I'm excited. I'm super excited. It's rare that people ask me about all of those weird things I did and actually have an interest. And here we are. So this is exciting for me.
I am very, very interested. And I want to start with a funny part because I said to you before we recorded that Kevin Brown is a very common name.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean that in any insulting way, but it is. And you agreed. And you said that you weren't supposed to be Kevin. You were supposed to be another name. What were you supposed to be?
My name was supposed to be Guillermo, which is my grandfather's name. I guess when I was birthed, the story goes that my dad just named me after a basketball player from the University of Kentucky, and his name was Kevin. He just thought it was a cool name, Kevin. So here I am, Kevin Brown.
I wonder what your mother said after she saw that birth certificate.
My mom is so cool about things. I doubt she cared.
Okay. Good enough. Tell me something. So your mom is from El Salvador. Did you go?
Yes.
Have you been to El Salvador? Did you travel to El Salvador with your mother?
Absolutely. Many times I've been to El Salvador. I've lived in El Salvador. My very first flight out of the United States was to El Salvador. And that's the story I wanted to tell you. One of the many stories I wanted to tell you because I think it's interesting. The year was 1988. And I was 13 years old. And based off of the face that you gave me, you don't know what was happening in El Salvador in 1988. But in 79 started the Civil War.
Oh.
Yes. And many children were, at 13, you had to choose to go to the army or run away to join the guerrilla fighter group. So the families were sending the children to the United States. So I grew up with a lot of children in my home who were Salvadorans, my mom's neighbors, kids, my mom's stepsisters, etc. So anyway, the war ended in 87-ish, and we went to El Salvador for the first time. I had seen El Salvador, but only on the news, and I thought forever they were guerrilla fighters. The word is actually guerrilla. Whatever. So the guerrilla fighters on TV, that's all I really knew. We got there. We went to San Vicente. We had a great time dancing in the square, eating pupusas. And then I started hearing boom, 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 boom. And at night. And I asked my mom, I said, "Mom, what's that?" And she said, "Oh, the fireworks here are so strong that that's what you're hearing." And then somebody cut the head off of a pig and they threw it at our house. And they wrote on the house in Spanish, "Fueran gringos," which means get out, gringos.
Foreigners. Yeah. Oh my God.
I covered my little sister's eyes. And we rapidly escaped the country. And that's when the second offensive of the Civil War started. And that was my first time traveling.
That's a nice way to travel, isn't it? Oh my God. Were you traumatized?
If I had a shrink, they probably would say yes. I don't think I was. To me, it's sparked this love of the world and understanding different places, different foods, being uncomfortable. Like I feel comfortable being uncomfortable, which is like strange because people are like, "Oh, Cyprus is so hot," and I'm like, eh, I mean, whatever, like, yeah, sure, I guess, but I find comfort in it. So
Um,
here we are.
but that is a matter of perception with everything you do in life. It's the way you look at things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's really it. I was just at a school fair and I had long sleeves on, and one of the dads said, "Oh my God, aren't you burning up?" And I said, "I don't get hot." And he said, "Oh, what do you mean you don't?" And I said, "Well, I mean, obviously, like Kelvin, the scale. I mean, there are absolutes, absolute zero that exists, but 78, 79, 81. What difference does it make to me? It's mental,
Yeah, of
it,
course.
so
Totally. Yes,
I,
yes.
I choose
Yeah.
not to think about those things. I have other things to think about,
That
but
is
I've done this around the world.
totally true because, the way you look at Dr. Wayne Dyer said, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
I don't know that, doctor, but that sounds
One of
quite
my mentors, because I'm a life coach as well and a hypnotherapist, and I love him because he has a lot of wisdom.
That's interesting. I have a master's in education, and when we were studying, and we were obviously I didn't study psychology, but psychologists play into it. And one of them said that the just by observing the observed changes. So the act of observing something changes the observed behavior,
Yeah.
which of course we found to be absolutely true.
Yes, it is. Now, you studied in the US,
Yes.
and that's why you are actually on my podcast, because you studied with a friend of mine called Sulla, who lives in
Oh,
Larnaca. And
yeah.
she introduced, this is a shout out to Sulla.
Hey, Sola.
She introduced you to me. And that's why we're going to talk about. Now, I want to know, how did you get into these interesting places? Like, no, it's not like ordinary people don't go to Mali or to Togo. How did that start? How did that happen? Or do we need to start somewhere else?
That's a super interesting question. And I was going to start to answer it before the podcast, but I wanted to save it. Um, Remind me where you're from?
I'm from Switzerland.
Switzerland, and I've never been to Switzerland.
Yeah.
And the pictures look absolutely beautiful. I've never been to a lot of places that look as beautiful as Switzerland. In fact, Cyprus is kind of like the nicest place that I've ever chosen to go. My choice, and I think it goes back to the being uncomfortable, was always to go to the places that were considered more, let's say, difficult for the average US American. So, like Togo, you mentioned Togo, yeah?
Yeah.
I had won a scholarship from Georgetown University in Washington, and they had given me a number of options: Kosovo, Azerbaijan, Turkey, Togo, China. One was in China. The most obscure to me, not in the world, but to me, from my perspective, place was Togo. I'd never heard of it. And so I looked it up, I read about it, and I was like, boy, that sounds challenging. That's for me. So I went to Togo. I went to Togo for 10 months. I stayed for 2 years.
Wow. How did you do that? Did you manage to stay at the university or did you do something else?
Well, the scholarship I had won, they had given me like a little apartment and a small stipend, so I wasn't suffering. I worked for the United States Embassy, and I worked at the university. I bought myself a little motorcycle, the little Chinese motorcycle, so I could get around. And I traveled on the continent of Africa as much as I could. which was where the Mali and Zanzibar and those things come into play. But I lived like my bed, my clothes, everything were in Lomé, Togo.
And
And
you did that with a motorcycle. You traveled around with your motorcycle.
West Africa, I traveled on a motorcycle. Yeah. East Africa, obviously, I have to take a plane. South Africa, I had to take a plane, and trains in South Africa as well. Trains in South Africa are amazing.
There's a train that is blue. I've always wanted to go on the blue train. Have you been on the
You
blue?
must. Yes.
Yeah, you have.
Yes. Yeah. Joburg to Cape Town.
Yes. Yes.
And
that's on my
and
bucket list.
the ostriches run with the train when you go through the pond, which is like this valley. Man, of course, it's kind of like a tourist train, right? Like the locals are going to get on the fastest possible train to get from Joburg to Cape Town. The blue train takes way too long, but there they have they bring you drinks, and they have a smoking cart, and they have a sleeping cart, and it's an adventure. It's something fun.
Yeah, I know. Because I was a tour guide when I was young, and I've actually been to Togo.
You've been to Togo?
Been to Togo, yes.
You might be you're where in Togo? Yeah, obviously it's a Lomé.
Yes. Is Lomé on the sea?
Yes.
Okay, yes, I've been to Lomé. It was in 1989.
That's amazing. So you were there under Iadima, Nasimbe Iadima, who was the previous president of Togo.
Yeah, it was just a short, somebody got sick and I had to go and help out. I think I was there for a month, but, just looking after Swiss tourists who were there on holidays. I didn't get to see much, but fascinating. I want to talk more about, you have really now opened I want to talk about Africa, because people, I have so many people on my podcast. They've been to Asia, they've been to South America, they've been, of course, all over Europe, but and they've been to South Africa. But Africa is not just South Africa.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. Now, I will say, and I say this all the time to anyone who will listen, I've been to now 27 countries, many of them for extended periods of time. The two most physically beautiful countries I've ever been to are South Africa and Costa Rica. I mean, you just look out the window and go, Jesus, what is going on here? This is beautiful. But the big difference being that South Africa is actually wildly dangerous, especially comparative to West Africa.
Mm-hmm.
There are many guns and lots of trauma. Everyone I met there was somehow traumatized by something that's happened in the last decade or two. I actually kind of left a bit sad. But yeah, most of the those the let's say the white people who came, we would joke about it and say South Africa is Africa light. It's like Africa 101, Intro to Africa, where people from Europe, they go there for a weekend and say, I've been to Africa.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's what I mean. That's why I said South Africa is not Africa, because countries like Togo and Mali and Ghana, have you been to Ghana?
Oh yeah. My friend said, I love Togo like my brother, but I love Ghana like my cousin. We used to get, the thing about Accra, have you been to Accra?
No, I haven't. No.
Oh, well, it's not far, but they had sushi, and so like in West Africa, there's not a whole lot of things like that. So they had sushi, they had nachos, they had a milk stout beer, and a movie theater. So we used to travel up to Accra quite a bit to get like nachos and beer and go sit in the movie theater with the air conditioned. It was only a few hours by bus. It'd take a weekend, let's say.
So coming from the US and then, arriving in Togo the first time when you went there, was it a bit shocking for you? How did you feel? Or now you're going to tell me that you are looking for the uncomfortable, but the first impression, how did you feel? Did you think that was a good choice, or did you think, Oh my God, I love it here. Or oh my God, I shouldn't have come here.
No, I didn't think any of those things, but I was a little nervous because Togo is francophone, and I didn't speak French. So anyway, I landed at night. They gave me a bottle of wine. I drank it, whatever, went to bed. The mosquitoes bit the shit out of me. It was terrible. The next day, no one came to see me. So I was like, well, and I had read in the books, don't drink the water, don't drink the water, malaria, don't drink the water. Those are the two things I was scared of. So I wanted to get some water. So I went out into the neighborhood and I walked around and I said, hey, can you tell me where the water is? Je parle anglais, yo bo. And I was like, oh. And in that moment, it occurred to me I didn't know how to say water in French. And that's when I was like, oh my God, what have I done? So it took me hours of walking in the sub-Saharan heat to figure out that "le"
You
would
know,
be, yeah, would be water, and that's how I would get, and that's how I learned French. I mean, not my French is terrible, but like basic street French well enough, really fast. It's because like, yo, if it's 98 degrees and you're in jeans and you need water, you're going to figure out the word. Let me tell you another story about that.
tell me.
I was in Dakar, Senegal, right? And they had put me up in a hotel. They put me on the fourth floor. So, but I'd flown in, I don't know, after midnight. So I got a bunch of beer. I don't know, whatever, 6 pack I think is normative. And I went up to my room, and I like smoke, but I don't like smoke in my room because I don't like it to smell bad. So that's weird. So I opened a beer and I went out on the balcony and I shut the door to have my cigarette. I turned around and the door was locked. So I'm locked on the balcony of this random hotel in Dakar, Senegal, which I had never been to Senegal before. I was like, damn it. So I wanted to yell, help. And that was the moment I didn't realize I knew how to say help in French because I did not know how to say it. Arrête. So you learn quickly, right? Anyway, just to finish that story, I tried to sleep on the balcony, but it was a bit chilly. So I picked my foot up, and as hard as I could, I kicked that door, and it didn't break. And I got scared, so I sat down, and I sat there for like an hour, and I was like, "No, I'm an adult. I'm not sleeping on a balcony." I stood up, bam, kicked the door through. I went downstairs, said, "I need a new room." They said, "Why, sir?" And I said, "I kicked the door out. We'll talk about it in the morning." And they said, "Okay." So, so I got a new room. I went to bed. Yeah.
That's funny, that this happened to me on a Nile cruise. This exactly the same thing happened to me on a boat on the Nile. But of course, there were people below, so I could call somebody. But I actually went on the balcony and I couldn't get back into my room.
How is that even like? Why would they
Don't know.
design
I
a
don't
door
know. How
like
does the
that?
door lock? I don't know. There are certain things that happen that we will never know.
Yeah, that's weird. Anyway,
Yeah.
poor design.
Yeah. That's so funny. So you did learn the most important things in French, but did you learn any Togolese or did you learn any of the local languages there?
Vegbe. So Togo is there's 40 ethnicities.
Yeah.
Obviously, you couldn't learn them all. So when you look at the families, the in the south near the sea is the family of Ga, and the local language is a Begbe or Mina. So yes, I learned Mina and a Begbe enough to get around, enough to
Okay.
negotiate prices, get taxi, order food, understand when I was being insulted, and toss one back. I found that my Togolese brothers and sisters, when they insulted me in Mina, and I kicked right back at them with an insult in French, they just howl with laughter. They would be like, yo, tu es comme ça. And I'd be like, oui, je suis comme ça là. And they'd be like, oh,
They
they
have a
clap.
good sense of humor, don't they? And you know what?
No,
I was thinking before when you were saying that you were locked on the balcony, we had no cell phones. Because in today's world, you would probably have taken your six pack and your cell phone out on the balcony, and you would have called
Yeah, no,
somebody.
not. See, I could do this all day, right? I was in Togo. I was in Lomé. It was night. No, it was daytime. And the we always taught the American girls never, if you're in trouble, never. And I'm like content alert. I'm going to say a word that might be trigger alert, but never say rape, because in the Togolese culture, that's not really anything that anyone would get upset about. But if you yell thief, everyone comes. So anyway, someone yelled, "Voleur, voleur, thief, thief." And the whole neighborhood came out and they started beating this guy, and they beat him with everything, right in the middle of the street. There are all these people. And I reached down in my pocket and I grabbed my cell phone because I did have one of those little Nokias. And I realized that there are no police in Togo. So there's no one to call. So then I was like, okay. So I just left. I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't going to watch it. So anyway, that's Togo. Togo,
Yeah.
Togo.
Yeah. So you just have to be very, very cautious at the same time. You have to be adventurous, but also cautious, calculated risk.
Calculated risk. Yeah. I live
Yeah.
my life that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you mentioned in the little correspondence that we had, you mentioned a Bri tribe in Central America. I have never heard that in my life. What is that?
The Bri are a pre-Columbian indigenous group. Their tribe existed before Christopher Columbus arrived to the Americas. And they live in the jungles along the border of Costa Rica and Panama. So, in order to get to the Bri tribes, you drive down to that area, and then you get to a river. There's no bridge because the Bribis don't have bridges. And you leave your car and you get in a canoe, and you take a canoe about 2 hours up the river, and then you begin your journey into Talama. So out there, Sepekwe was probably my favorite village. No electricity. Anyway, that's the Bribri. I'll tell you an interesting story. I was staying in Sepekwe, and they had given me a hammock, which was super kind of the family. And the host's father said, we have an event. It's whatever day it was like Tuesday. He was like, we have an event tonight. If that's okay, we're gonna have some friends over. And I was like, yeah, yeah, that's great. So anyway, he went outside and he fired up a generator. And then he pulled a blanket off the wall and he had a flat screen TV. And, and these little indigenous girls, and what you are probably imagining as indigenous dresses, came over and they put on Mexican soap operas, which we call novellas, which these,
Yes.
voluptuous supermodels. And and I'm sitting here with this indigenous tribe, and we didn't have chairs, so we sat on the floor. There were pigs running underneath the boards of the house, and we watched an hour of novellas, which are what they are, these supermodels. And I was like, this is so bizarre. And when it was over, they all just stood up very kindly, and Dad went out, kicked off the generator, and that was it. And I went to bed in my hammock that night, and I was like, I don't understand. I don't understand. But, here we are. Another night that I was there, I said, I need to take a shower. And they said, sure. If you go down that path through the jungle, you'll come to a river and you can bath in the river. And it was nighttime, and it gets dark, dark, dark in the jungle very early, and not a little bit dark. We're talking no electricity, black. And I'm in the jungle. You hear the sounds, the night sounds of the jungle, and I'm walking with my towel and my little bar of soap, trying to get to the river. And if you pass somebody in this part of the jungle, you yell out, I'm going to kick back and do it. Ah! Oh! And when you do that, the person responds. And this, because we're all carrying machetes, by the way, and most everybody's drinking. So here we are, two grown men in the middle of the jungle, pitch black. One, if not both of us, are wildly drunk with machetes. So we do that to say, like, it's cool, you cool. And they say, like, they call back, you know? So I started hearing this rustling, like someone was walking. So I called out, "Ah!" And nothing came back. I just turned around and as fast as I could, I made it back to the hut that I was staying in. And they were like, "Oh, Kevin, you didn't take a shower." And I was like, I'm good. Don't worry about it. I was, but I was scared, dude. I was scared, is what it was, because I didn't know. It
Yeah, of
was too.
course, of course. And when you're talking about, because when there is no light, there is no place like the desert or the jungle when it gets really, really dark. But that's when you see the most beautiful stars.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. When I came back to America, they had put this. Every time I go back to America, something new has happened. The United States, America. So they had put these satellites in the sky
Mm-hmm.
that are like stars.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very confusing to me, and I can't understand that kids are going to grow up looking at those, and it's not the sky that I grew up with, and it's not the sky that I know and love. It's just weird to me. I will say something about Togo because you're 4 degrees off the equator. You can see both the Southern Cross and the Big Dipper, which are sailor navigational points. I don't know how much you know about.
Not
I'm not
much. I
trying.
don't know anything about no, but it's fascinating.
I'm not trying to mansplain you, but the Southern Cross, the stars point
How do I
directly,
know? Yeah,
and the Big Dipper, the two stars
yeah.
point directly north, and those are navigational points for the old sailors. Generally, wherever you are, you can only see one of the constellations. But in Togo, you can see both of them at the same time.
How amazing. That is amazing. Wow. Yeah. So yeah, I actually envy you for all your Africa experience because that is fascinating. And I haven't spoken to anybody who has been to all these places. Now, you are from the US, you've been to all these wild places. You were you studied in Washington, DC. How
Yes.
on earth did you end up on my island in the sun, on in Cyprus? That's what I call it. I call it my island in the sun.
Well, I didn't know it was your island, so I
It's
apologize
our island. I'll share it
for
with
not
you.
asking permission. When I was a kid, I got a job at a gourmet restaurant, and everyone, including the manager and all the waiters, were all Cypriot from the Cypriot diaspora. So 15 to like 20, I worked with these Cypriot guys. When I went on to college, they introduced me to the college age kids. When I looked around, and I've told you that I'm Salvadoran, everybody at our school was white, 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 white. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I didn't feel like I necessarily always fit in. But with the Cypriot kids, I always felt like I fit in. I was like, oh, these are kind of like my cousins. Like our culture is kind of the same. Anyway, so I just hung out with those dudes. And one summer, this beautiful, beautiful girl came to visit on the Great American Road Trip with her brother. And that's when I met my wife, Katerina.
Wow, that's a beautiful story. And you
Yeah.
ended up here, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think it,
Well, I was working for the US government at the Department of Labor. We were discussing where we would live. And I owned a house in Washington. And one night, somebody shot off an AK in front of my house.
mm,
And my buddies pulled out their Glocks and their nines to check the windows. And I ran upstairs to grab the shotgun because shotgun was on the second floor of the house. And that's when I was like, you know what? No, I'm not going to. This is going to be movies to my child. This is not going to be Tuesdays. So I quit my job with the government, which was probably stupid. I sold my house, definitely stupid, and flew halfway across the world with my dog and my antique car. Here I am. Hi.
But Cyprus is a good place to live. We said that before. And you know what? Every place has advantages and disadvantages. And I think Cyprus has more advantages. Life is what you make of it.
Yeah, but that's true. I'm not going to lie to you or anybody else. I find Cyprus a bit boring for me personally. I've been here on this island longer than I've been anywhere in the world in my entire life. So it's probably a little too long for me. Before I came to Cyprus, I had never been anywhere longer than 5 years. And I've been here 6.
Exactly. Same with me. I was a tour guide. I was all over the place, and I was suddenly married in Cyprus and had 2 small children, and it took a bit of adjustment. I can tell you that. But my secret is travel as much as you can. Leave. You need to get away from the island regularly.
That's what they tell me. I'm going to London next week, so I look forward to taking a moment to myself just off the island. No offense to Cyprus, it's a beautiful place and it's a wonderful place, but I'm a foreigner, and I think it's obvious everywhere I go, and sometimes that gets a little tiring. Sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm going to go up to London.
Nice. What are you going to do in London? Is it going to be like have you been to London before?
Oh, yeah. I mean, London's a stopover, isn't it?
Yes.
When you're going places from the US to get to this side of the world, London and
but sometimes it's just for many people, it's just a stopover. They don't go and see it.
I mean, but that's not me. That's why I'm on this podcast, right? I tell you, I love Paris. I've loved Paris ever since I first set foot. But I was traveling with the U.S. government, and they said, Kevin, on your way back from Lomé this year, you have a layover in Paris for 7 hours. Is that going to be okay? And I said, do I have a choice? And they said, yeah, absolutely. I said, you don't care how long my layover is. Is that what you're telling me? And they were like, no, we don't care. You just have to get on the next flight. I said, okay, make it 7 days. And they said, okay. So I got to spend a week in Paris, and I traveled to the south of France, which is stunning.
It is.
I mean, castles and sunflowers. And I went to visit a friend who lives in a castle, who was a nun. And it was just amazing. So, but yes, I have been to London.
And you
I don't know it very well. And that's something I was trying to tell you. I don't know the super nice places all that well. I rode the red bus that has 2 floors. And they took me around the town. And then at the end, they put you on a boat and you go down the river, Thames or Thames or
yeah.
So I've done those things, which I think are pedestrian, but like, why not? It's fun. It's cute.
They're fine. But I just wanted to add, when you were having your 7-day stopover in France, you got to practice all your French that you learned in Togo.
You know, it's funny. My French friends don't love speaking French with me. My French isn't good enough, I guess, especially in Paris. And then as an American, my American English is a bit offensive as well, especially in Paris. If you've been to Paris, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
However, because I'm Salvador and I'm fluent in Spanish, and everyone in Paris speaks Spanish. So I kick to Spanish, they kick to Spanish. Everyone's super nice. We have a great time. They usually ask me if I'm Mexican, which I'm not. Because that's the only Spanish-speaking country that, like, a lot of people know of.
Yes.
Like, they don't necessarily know El Salvador. So, anyway. But that's how I get on in France, is using Spanish.
Perfect. Listen, we're getting to the end. We're already...
No, I have a week's more...
Well, we'll do it. We'll do it next, because I try to keep my podcasts around 35, 40 minutes, and we're into that. But now I don't remember what I was going to say. Is there somewhere where you would love to go to that you haven't been? Is there a place in your head that you would think, oh my God, that really is number one on my bucket list?
Yeah, Japan.
Ah,
Yeah, I've not been to Asia. I don't know unless you count Cyprus as Asia, which I mean I think is questionable. But like Asia, I'm really into robots, like more than the average bear. I feel like Japan has
yeah.
the robots that I want. I would like to go. I'd like to go to China because I have some robots that I've built that I would like to mass produce. So maybe next year I get to go to, if I can come up with funding and da da da. Maybe I'll go to China and visit some factories. That would be fun. So yeah.
I've just come back from China. I was in China 2 weeks ago because my son is studying there. And I was absolutely blown away. I have to tell you, I had been there 35 years ago when I was a tour guide, and it is so modern, so clean, so organized. It's amazing. You would love it.
Yeah. I would guess so. I would be curious what Chinese food tastes like in China. Every country I've been to, it tastes a little different.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like maybe it's catered to local tastes.
It is. It is.
So I would be curious, like, what does Chinese food
Yeah,
taste like?
Chinese food
Yeah.
in China is delicious. It's food heaven, and there's such a variety because here people just know sweet and sour pork, and it's it's very limited. But
But
no,
let's not hate on sweet and sour pork
not
because
at
that's
all,
good.
not at all. Everybody is entitled to their sweet and sour pork. So, Kevin, let's make a
Yes.
deal. When you've been
Okay.
to China and to Japan, you will
Yeah.
come back on my podcast.
Oh my God, that's like a great goal.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm going
A
to
new
hold you to it.
episode because we're going to end this one, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. Really have.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for being on Most Memorable Journeys, Mr. Kevin Brown.
Thank you.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.